fellow travelers, Mark here with Wolters World, and today we're here in Toronto, and today we're going to talk about some of the don'ts of taking the train in Canada, because if you want to enjoy this country, you can see a lot of it by rail, and it is a gorgeous ride, almost everywhere you go. And I just want to give you some heads up so you can have a better train trip when you are here. And I think the first thing I want you to know is don't wait to buy your tickets. If you're going to be traveling in the summer or on the weekends or during a holiday, those tickets book out in advance, like weeks or months in advance. If you want to get one of the fancier train cars or a private train or a prestige train, the really expensive one on the Canadian that goes from Toronto to Vancouver, those things can sell out months in advance. So make sure you're booking ahead, okay? Also, if you book ahead, you get a better price. Yes, that's very helpful. So do be aware of that. And one thing that's cool is if you're not sure what the right ticket to get for you is, the right class, the people at VIARail Canada are actually super helpful. So maybe you want to pick up the phone and call them and have them help you get the right ticket or the right seat, because there is a difference from sitting economy and just having a seat for those 4 days on the train going out to Vancouver versus have a sleeper where you have someplace to sleep and lay down and sit up and enjoy the view as well. So something to think about. Second don't I think is really important that people kind of forget, especially our friends, our European friends that come over here, is don't think it's going to be a short train ride. There are no short train rides in Canada. Canada goes from one side of the continent to the other side of the continent, and you take the train through there, it's gonna take time. I mean, the commuter train between Montreal and Toronto is over 5 hours long, okay? If you don't get the fast one, it can be 8 hours long. If there's delays, God knows how long it could be. So you have to realize it's gonna take time. Like I said, 3 to 4 days to go from Toronto to Vancouver. It's a day from Montreal to Halifax. So you do have to realize that it's gonna be some time. So you're gonna spend a lot of time on the train. So that's what my next don't is, don't forget to bring snacks and drinks with you when you do take the train in Canada. Even if it is just the Montreal to Toronto line, you're gonna want something to eat. Like, they supply you food, which is super cool and it's relatively decent, but you're gonna want snacks, especially if you have kids. You're gonna have something they're gonna want to munch on, okay? And don't trust VIARail Canada have everything you'd ever want when it comes to eats and drinks, okay? So definitely pack up before you go. What's cool is the train stations here, a lot of them have kiosks inside, so you can buy some food, buy some snacks, and do that. I grabbed my ketchup chips and my chunky Kit Kat and my Canada dry ginger ale, so I was good for my ride, but it's one of those things I did see some of the kids going, "Mom, I'm hungry," so you want to be careful with that. Now, one of the disappointing things I have to let you know when you take the train in Canada, as much as you see the panoramic train and the beautiful views, the Rocky Mountains, the plains, all kinds of stuff, is, yeah, you see some of those beautiful things sometimes, but don't expect to see those beautiful postcard views the entire trip. Because if you're going, sometimes you get kind of in a tree tunnel where it's just tree cover and you don't actually see any of the sights just because it's trees on both sides. Other times you're traveling at night, so you can't see in the dark. You can, that's totally cool. I can't. So that kind of takes away a bit. And sometimes when you think you're going to get in, you're going to be going through at a time where you're going to be able to see things when it's light. A delay here and there might mean you miss it, and so the timing and the lighting isn't right. So don't expect to see those great views all the time. Now, you'll see a lot of great views, don't get me wrong, but it's not always there. Oh, and one thing I want to add about the snacks, don't bring smelly snacks on the train. Nobody likes that, okay? Nobody. So no smelly snacks, okay? That's an international train rule. No smelly snacks on the train, because that's not going to make you any friends. Because that's another thing is, don't be shy on the train in Canada, because you're going to be on the train so long, you're going to meet the people you're sitting by, the people in front of you, the people to the side of you, the people in the car, the panoramic car, all these things. So maybe throw in a pack of Uno cards to play some cards while you're traveling, because you don't want to be rude, and smelly food is rude, okay? So don't forget to meet your fellow travelers when you're on the way. And especially if you're on one of those long ones, the Canadian going from Toronto to Vancouver, you kind of get this kind of camaraderie with everybody on there because you're sitting on the train for 4 days straight together. Now, another thing I think is important when you're going to take the train here is don't overpack, because if you're taking certain trains, like the train from Toronto to Montreal, they had certain luggage restrictions. So you could have 2 carry-ons in a backpack or 1 big suitcase in a backpack. Or if you're going to be taking one of those long distance ones, the sleepers, going, they might have it that you don't have enough room in your room for your stuff. So you want to be careful with that. Now, sometimes you can check your baggage, you can do it that way, but if you want to keep it with you, realize it's a train. There's limited space on there, okay? Now, if you're going to take the commuter train, sometimes they'll have spaces at the end of the compartment for you to put your big luggage, and there might be stuff above, but just know you want to pack light when you're on the train here. Another thing I want to tell you, if you're taking some of these long trains, don't forget to pack some layers, because it can get a little cool in the winter and in the summer in the evening when you're on the train. So having layers, I mean, I like my coat here that I can squish up and make into a pillow as well, so I can take a nap on the train, but do know it can be a little chilly sometimes on the train. Now, sadly, I have to give you some bad news. For those of you that are super train fanatics who like to take these long, super long trains, I gotta tell you, don't think there is one train that goes from one side of Canada to the other. There's not. There's a lot of different trains, and you can go from Halifax to Vancouver, but you're going to have to switch. You'll take the ocean, that's what it's called, from Halifax to Montreal. Then in Montreal, you got to switch to the commuter train, Montreal to Toronto. And then here in Toronto, you take it's called the Canadian, and you take that from here out to Vancouver. And you'll pass through Winnipeg and Edmonton and Jasper and stuff, so you do have that. But don't think you're just going to be on one train the whole time. Now, when you're getting on the train, I think another thing that's important is don't put your ticket away, because you're going to need to show your ticket, one, to get on the train in the first place, but also then the train people come by and check your ticket again. And if they change personnel, they might check it again. So just have a heads up, keep it relatively close. What I do recommend is just have it on the app, so you have your little QR code and you can just show them that way. Actually, what I did is I screen captured it, so I had that, so I didn't have to open the app. Because another thing I want to tell you is don't expect to have cell signal the entire ride. Okay, if you're going for the long day, well, there's going to be times where you have hours of no cell signal, all right? And if you say, oh, I'll just use the Wi-Fi on there, I'm going to tell you this. Don't expect the Wi-Fi to work, or don't expect to always have Wi-Fi when you're on the train. I was on the Montreal to Toronto train, and there was Wi-Fi on there, but it didn't work. I was connected, but it would take 4 or 5 minutes for a sports site to load. I'm not streaming videos. I'm just looking at scores. I want to know the Blue Jays Seattle game, what's going on, right? So don't expect a lot of signal when you're here. So be aware of that. Now, I know I mentioned this before about calling to ask for help, but just in general, if you're at the train station or you're on the train, don't be afraid to ask for help from the VIARail Canada people. They are super friendly and super helpful. They will get you on the right track. If you've got your kids with you, they'll be like, oh, you want to go on this side and board here because you get to go on earlier. If you're in Montreal or here in Toronto, just know that, because they are super helpful. That's one thing I got to give it to VIARail. They got some really helpful people, whether you're buying your tickets or you're on the train. And the thing is, they're very friendly, but there's sometimes they might not be as friendly as you think they should be. And that's usually when you forget your manners. So don't forget your train manners. Keep your shoes on when you're walking around. Don't be super loud and listen to your music without the headphones and stuff. Just your usual, kind of normal, manners kind of stuff. Also, don't put your feet with your shoes on the seat. It's kind of rude, okay? They don't like that. Now, remember when I told you that you shouldn't expect to have the great views all the time? Another thing I need to tell you is don't expect great pictures out the windows of the train, because one, you're moving, so anything close by gets all blurry. Even if you have a good camera, well, if you have a good camera, it should be okay, but if you're using your phone and stuff, so don't just sit there and click, 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 because a lot of them get quite blurry. I actually just do mostly video, just to make it so I have something that I can remember my trip by. But yeah, don't be surprised if you got a lot of blurry pictures that you've taken out those windows of that beautiful scenery you see. So when you're not taking pictures, you might want to be doing something. And since the Wi-Fi isn't so good, I do recommend don't forget to bring some stuff to do, okay? Bring your Kindle, bring some books, download some movies onto your phone. If you've got your kids with you, make sure you download some stuff on their iPad so they have stuff to do without Wi-Fi, because otherwise those long train rides can get a bit annoying for the little ones and the big ones if they don't have something to do. One of the cool things about riding the rails here is actually you get to pick your meals, and when they make the meals for you, on the Canadian, the food's a lot better. The food on the Montreal-Toronto commuter train, I said plane because it's more like airplane food, blah, nothing exciting. But what's cool is you actually can pick your meal. And what's funny is that they have vegan options, vegetarian options. My favorite was there was actually a bland option. No joke, bland was one of the options that was on there. So you can pick the food and they have it and they know where you're going to sit, so you're fine with that. Another thing I would say is when you are going to be taking the train, especially those long distance ones, like the Canadian that's coming from Vancouver to Toronto, or the ocean, which is going from Halifax to Montreal, don't be surprised they're a little late, okay? Because they do have delays. Okay, since we're in Toronto, I gotta show you the other famous thing here, the CN Tower. And let's continue on with our don'ts of the train travel here in Canada. And I think another one I think is really important, no matter what train you're taking in the country, don't forget to hold on. I mean, you'll see signs that says always have 3 points of contact, like 2 feet and 1 hand, or 2 hands and 1 foot. I don't know how else you're gonna do that, but honestly, the tracks are very bumpy. When you're going around, you're gonna wanna hold on to a seat or a luggage overhang or whatever, because it is really bumpy. This is not a smooth ride when you take the train here. And I think that leads into another don't. I mean, don't think riding the train in Canada is like riding the train in France or Germany, where they have the high-speed trains that are very smooth, very fancy. No, this is more closer to Amtrak than a TGV, okay? I mean, it's nicer than Amtrak in a lot of ways, but it's still closer to Amtrak than the fancy European trains. So don't expect to be overly wild with a smooth ride when you're here. But one thing they don't have as much in Europe that you will love on the trains here in Canada is if you're on one of the trains that has the panoramic wagon, okay? You know, the one where it's like the windows all the way around? Those are gorgeous. And if you go there, you've got to take a ton of pictures that won't come out very well, of course, but maybe some will. But get the video. But oh my goodness, I mean, it's the views that get you to sign up to take a train through Canada is what you see in those panoramic trains. So don't miss out on the chance for that. And the thing is you might not always get the panoramic train, or you might not always get that option. And that's why I think it's really important to really don't doubt the different levels of tickets here. I know we talked about that before, but honestly, the different things you get, whether you're an economy or business or prestige or sleeper, is really a thing, okay? So I'm saying this a second time because you really need to make sure you're getting the right train for you, or the right, compartment for you for the trip you're gonna be on. Now, sadly, I also have some bad news for you. Some places taking the train is the cheap way to get around places. I gotta tell you this, don't think the train in Canada is gonna be cheap. Now, it's not super expensive in some routes, but honestly, it can be quite expensive. And if you start getting the higher end stuff, the business classes, the prestige things, we're talking hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars for doing that Canadian, going from Toronto to Vancouver. So do be aware of that. So if you're thinking, oh, I'll take the cheap train ride from Montreal to Toronto, well, actually, if you do the business class train, I paid over 300 Canadian to take that train, whereas the flight was like 150 bucks. So sometimes it's not an economical choice. You're really doing it for the experience and the ease of walking on and off a train. So there's a lot more don'ts and do's about taking the train in Canada. Please, if you have more advice for people who are going to be training in Canada, please put in the comments section below so we can help out other travelers enjoy riding the rails of this beautiful country. Anyway, I'll say bye from here in Toronto.